Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Book Tribe podcast, where we ask authors and people who help authors for their tips, insights, and guidance for modern day writers. And today I'm pleased to be joined by Emma, an author and book coach. Hello, Emma.
Hello. Lovely to be here. Thanks for asking me to chat.
Oh, absolutely. And we were saying just before we started how you're actually the first British person that I've had on this show. So welcome. This is actually during the day and not in the evening, which is great. But to begin with, we're just going to get started with some quick fire bookish questions, just some silly questions to get us into the flow of things. How does that sound?
That sounds good fun. Go for it.
Awesome stuff. So the first question is, what is your favourite type of protagonist? If you could kind of summarise
Do you
what they're
know,
like.
I read a book recently and the protagonist, she was kind of snarky and actually a bit unlikable, but I rather liked that. It was a quite refreshing change. So I enjoyed that side. But normally I would say probably a fairly standard answer, I'm sure. I like strong women. So I want a woman who is going from a situation where everything's very difficult and she's doubting herself, and then she discovers her inner strength, and by the end of the book she has reinvented herself to some degree. So I like that because it makes me feel that maybe I can do that too.
Absolutely. And actually what you were saying about that snarky character that's not all that likable, like I was reading a book a couple of weeks ago and I was just like, this character is me, and it's not because I'm unlikable, but the way that she was like, she was an ice queen, but then it was like, it was the inside of her brain, like she was just so insecure and she felt so out of place that she put that front on, and I was like, oh my god, that's so relatable. Anyway, second question. So how would you describe your reading personality? So for me, I'm a mood reader through and through, and that really does depend on, like, you know, genre wise what I feel like reading, but also, you know, how much I'm reading. So sometimes I'll like binge read, and then other times I'm like taking my time. But what about you?
Yeah, I'd say I'm less of a mood reader than I used to be. I find now that books are my job, if you like. I'm much more strategic about what I read. So I write psychological thrillers. So I read very much in that genre, just always trying to learn, trying to absorb what I can about that genre and that type of storytelling. But then every now and again, I need to just kind of break out and read something that is a little less taxing or a little less scary, maybe. So I do enjoy, I quite like historical. I don't like romance per se, but I enjoy it if there's a romantic element to the story. So I've been reading some nice historical novels set in the city where I live, which is Edinburgh, and I'm enjoying that kind of stepping back into what the city used to be like before it became this kind of bustling capital city. But yeah, I like historical. And what else do I like? Yeah, no, I'd say that's it. I'd go with those two.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. I love historical as well. I'm an art historian. I did a degree in art history, so yeah, completely get it. And actually, my dissertation was about Margaret Douglas, who was the mother of Lord Darnley of Scotland. So loads of connections happening here. And the last question for these quick fire bookish questions, which never is all that quick, is what's your favourite trope and why?
Ooh, my favourite trope. That's a good question. I don't think I've got an answer to that one, actually. I don't think I have a favourite particularly.
Or your least favourite?
I'm failing you on this question. I don't. Yeah,
You can't fail me, Emma. That's fine.
I guess and maybe this is where my learning needs to come in as an author. I don't really think in terms of tropes. I just tend to think in terms of characters that I really like and enjoy, and always kind of looking for that little twist in them. But as for specific tropes that you might find, say in a romance, or you might find in a fantasy book, I don't know. I don't have a favorite. Gosh, that's a good question.
As you say that, I do question, is it more of like a romance thing to have those tropes? You know, the enemies to lovers, the friends to lovers, you know, is that more of a romance thing, perhaps?
I think in those very strong genres, there does tend to be, I do see it in sci-fi and fantasy a lot as well, that there are very strong roles. If we think about the the hero's journey type, very common story structure there. We've got specific tropes that come in. But no, there, I think though that's maybe a bit of my learning that I need to kind of evolve as well. But mostly I go into it for character, and that's what I always encourage my writers to do, rather than thinking in terms of tropes, then to thinking of what's going on behind the scenes with this character, what makes them interesting.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and thank you so much for answering those questions. They're just, you know, not really all that relevant to why we're here, but nevertheless, let's get started with just learning a bit more about your background and how it was that you ended up working with authors.
So I, like a lot of people, have always wanted to be a writer ever since I was quite little. And I've gone through a lot of phases where I would write a lot and then life would take over and I'd stop. And then I'd write a lot, life would take over and I'd stop. And it wasn't until I was getting to my 40th birthday and I was like, oh, do you know what, Emma? You either do this, finally write this book and put it out into the world, like you've said you've always wanted to do, or don't, and just draw a line under it and move on. But I think for a lot of writers, it's like an itch that just keeps coming back. So I decided, do it. Okay, just write a first draft, just do it and see if you enjoy this process. If you love it, then maybe you can go on and revise. If you hate it, then at least you know you've done it and you can move on from life and stop worrying about this thing. So I wrote that first draft and found out, whilst it was very challenging to do, and anyone who's written a book knows how challenging it is, I also did enjoy it. It was a sort of challenge that I enjoyed and got lots of satisfaction from. So I went ahead and I revised the book and eventually put it out into the world. And I remember just feeling really proud of myself that I'd finally achieved something that I had thought was beyond me, that I couldn't do, that I didn't have the sticking power for, and maybe didn't have the imagination for, all of these doubts in my head. And I was also kind of conscious of the time, the sort of chapter in life that I was in as well, that season of life I was in. And I remember thinking, I wonder how many other kind of middle-aged women there are, stay-at-home mothers there are, who feel that they've left it too late and think they've missed that opportunity to write the book that they want to do. And I remember very early on thinking, I really want to help other women do this, because now that I've done this, I kind of think, oh, well, what else can I do that I've said no to myself about? And so that's where that idea to help other people started. And I carried on doing my own writing and putting my own books out, but all the time thinking I really want to help others. And so that's when I felt that I'd got to enough experience, then I started coaching and helping other, mostly women, write their first books. Because once you write your first book, I think you're off to the races. You'll get going, and you'll know you can do it then.
Yeah, and so during that journey of writing your first book, what were kind of the learning lessons that you reflected on at the end?
So I'm somebody who I want everything done now or yesterday. And if it takes a long time, then I get very impatient and I lose interest. And what I learned from that whole experience was actually, if I take my time, if I acknowledge that this takes time and I just stick with it and do a little bit, and I get to the end, the sense of achievement is so much stronger than if I'd been able to do this over a weekend and just got it out there. There's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just satisfaction that comes from working long term on something that's hard. And that was really new for me. And I'm sure I'm not alone in kind of, I hear from a lot of writers, I just want to have written already. I just want to have written the book already. And that was very much me. But actually, the reward is so much greater by knowing that I can do a long-term project. I'm capable of it. I do have the sticking power. And then that reward at the end is just so, so much stronger. And so that's been something I come back to again and again, no matter what I'm doing, no matter if it's a story, no matter if it's to do with my coaching business or another element of my business, to do with parenting even, that there's a long-term goal, a long-term picture. And if I just keep putting one foot in front of the other, eventually I'll get there and it'll be worth it.
No, and I think that's so relatable, even if you just, take it into a different context, into a business context, that actually that's the feeling is exactly the same in a business. And I think it's as you say, it's not uncommon, but there is sometimes, you know, that need to kind of take a step back and just be like, okay, Rome wasn't built in a day, you know, like we've got to really plan this out, and to, because I think as well, and this happens with entrepreneurs who are building their first business, is that actually everything's riding on you. And so then you put in all the time and all the effort, and so you burn yourself out quickly as well, which is, you're not going to help anyone burning yourself out.
No.
So with a lot of the authors that you work with, are they all just kind of in those first stages, and is it a particular genre that you work with?
It's not actually. The emphasis for me is on those first-time novelists. So I've found that the people I mostly work with are writers who have had this idea for a book that's been with them for decades. Some of them will have maybe 2 or 3 kind of half-finished drafts of it, as in it's changed as new ideas have come in, but they've never managed to get to that finish line.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily about the genre in which someone's working. I work with people who I know are committed to this, because it is a long-term commitment to write, particularly your first book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a book that you have so much riding on emotionally. So I need to know that that writer is committed, because often I'll work with people for a year. And when people say, a year? Oh my goodness, is it going to take me that long? It's like, well, yeah, it is going to take you that long.
It could.
It's a slow burn. It's a slow burn because you've got the rest of life going on as well. You might be working, you might have kids or grandkids that you're looking after. And so it takes time. And also life, you know, you want to go on holiday and you need to take time out. So it does take a year even just to get to that end of that first draft. And so that for me is the bigger commitment, to know that. And I have a intake process where we chat through this before I take on a client, to know that they are committed, to know that they do want to do this, that they understand that this is a long-term thing. And no matter, it's not so much about what stage they're at either of the writing, it's the commitment to do it. That's the hardest thing. And often, I may be jumping ahead here, but often my biggest role is actually cheerleading and keeping people from stepping back off that ledge, because it does get hard. It is challenging to do this. And there's a specific point within the storytelling process that everybody goes, oh, why am I doing this? I hate this story. I never want to see it again. And that's when a lot of people give up and stop. So part of my job is to, yes, help with the structure, help with the characterization, but also just to keep people going and keep them nudging along when it does get tough. I don't know if I answered your question there, Erica. But
well, I guess then kind of naturally moving on to kind of that piece of what they can get out of working with you or a book coach. What kind of things can they expect to kind of go through in that process?
So from my end, it's about giving people, there's some prep work that we do to get people to think about the book behind the book, or the story behind the story, so they understand why they're writing this, why it's important to them, what is the sort of, every book, whether we as readers we realize it or not, the author has a kind of message or a theme that they're trying to share through the book. It's not always obvious to the reader, but the writer needs to know that. And so part of my job is to help the writer kind of understand what it is they're trying to say about life with this book. So that's a bit of the kind of pre-work that we do. And then throughout the actual writing of the manuscript, a big part of it is deadlines, giving people deadlines. A lot of people who find it hard to write a book on their own is because they need that accountability. And I'm one of those people too. I need accountability, and I get to offer that to them. And then I get to feed back on the pages that they send me. So there's a certain number of pages that people send me, and I can feed back on those with inline comments. And so through doing that, there's a bit of there's the learning that comes in, and writers are able to learn where their skills are, because we're all good at something, and it's important to recognize that we all have a natural skill set. And then the other bit of that is, okay, well, what's the bit that I need to work on that I'm not finding so easy? So that sort of craft type of learning is part of the coaching. There's also then the mindset part of it. I'm big on mindset. I think that's sort of 50% of what it takes to bring a book to a place where it can be either queried or published is being in the right frame of mind and understanding that craft will get you so far, but you actually need tenacity and resilience to get you the other half of the way. So I get to kind of do my pep talk and talk to people about that and keep, stop them from giving up. And a lot of it is brainstorming as well. And this is I think authors find this actually one of the most valuable parts of it. There is nobody else who is as invested in their book as I am. So there's nobody else who's going to be reading their pages, thinking about their pages, feeding back on their pages, and asking questions about their pages and the story and the characters that they're writing about. And it's through those conversations, those brainstorming conversations, when someone's feeling kind of stuck about how to get their character either into trouble or then how to get them out of trouble, that's when a lot of the biggest aha moments comes for the writer, and they think of something they wouldn't have thought of, or it would have taken them a longer time to get there if they hadn't had someone to bounce these ideas around with. So there's sort of three points to that, I think. One is the accountability and the pulling you back off that ledge. There's the craft learning as well about how to structure a story, how to deepen your characters, and why if your character is strong enough, your reader will follow your character anywhere as long as they're believable. And then that idea of brainstorming and just generating new ideas, fresh ideas that keep the story interesting and keep the writer interested in the story as well.
So actually that last point kind of is something that I wanted to talk to you about in terms of the AI piece, because I think over the last year, across all industries, AI has been a massive market disruptor. In my day job, we had a month, it was like dark February, and it was basically we lost half our clients overnight as the marketing business, because a lot of clients were, for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons was that they could do a lot of the creative content using AI themselves. Now, there's a whole, well, that's not actually part of your strategy and your campaign planning and, your business anyway. And we'll skip past that bit because that's not actually all that relevant. But I think what we're seeing is that AI offers, yes, some risks, but also some benefits. So in terms of the book coaching piece and kind of that brainstorming, my question is it possible, or do you see it becoming possible, that AI eventually plays a role in being that book coach? What do you think?
Yeah, I do. It's such an interesting topic. It's so controversial at the moment. The idea around creativity and it coming from a human or coming from a machine. But I just to the point that you were making about the marketing side of it, just quickly, I know it's not part of it, but I think it's really interesting, and I think people will begin to learn, actually, there's a skill set that's needed to use the AI to produce the content that you want. And we will be learning that as indie authors particularly, but also authors who are maybe in the traditional space, but with a smaller publisher or their debut, so they're not getting the budget from the bigger publishers that they would hope for. They're having to do the marketing themselves. But if we stick with indie authors for the moment, as an indie author, you have so many hats to wear. Not only are you the creator, but you're the publisher, you're the marketer, you're the PR person, you're everything. And I very much see AI as a tool to help me with all of these different roles that are not what I came into writing for. So if AI could help me write a Facebook ad or write a blog post or whatever it might be, I'm all for that. I do also use it in my writing as well. I've just started doing that and experimenting with it and seeing how it goes. So I see, where I've used it so far and how I can see it's going to come into its own in the future is I will have my story outline, and then I can upload that to my AI tool and I can ask it, can you see any plot holes here? Where is it weak? Where is it being too obvious? And I have to, I'm still learning how to use the prompt. So there's a bit of in there for me, but it's been great. It's been coming back and said to me, yeah, this is really obvious. It seems a bit too coincidental that this has happened. I think the word was convenient that it came back with. So then I'm able to say, well, okay, I'm a bit stuck. Can you give me some ideas? about how I can make this more interesting. And I specify, can you give me 5 ideas? And it will give me 5 ideas. And then I can either choose one of those, or quite often what I've heard from other people too is that it sparks an idea.
Mm-hmm.
So what it's one of its ideas is not exactly right, but it's on the right track. So, but if I tweak it a bit, it'll fit my story, my characters, and the genre in which I'm writing. So I can see that there is a real role for AI, particularly we're just going to see it get better and better over the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That all writers can come up with their own idea, have their own plan and feel and be secure in the fact that this is their idea, this has come from them, their brain, their imagination. Feed it into AI and say, where are the plot holes here? What can I not see? And it can be objective. I think this is the key thing, is that AI can be objective and come back and feedback. And so it's still you. No one's, you're not cheating. I don't feel anyway that you're cheating in any way, but you're getting that kind of critique partner role. I think though, where the role of a coach may still have a part to play is that we still want to have that human interaction, and it's still nice to be able to kind of bounce ideas off. And you'll know yourself in a meeting with somebody or a call with somebody, it's the off the cuff comment sometimes that's where the gold is. It's not in the planned agenda or the briefing notes that you've got, but actually it's just that spark of an idea. And I think that is still one of the bits of magic that comes from working with another human. But there's absolutely a role for AI in this, and it's only going to get easier and easier for us to incorporate that into our writing process.
Yeah, no, I think all of what you've just said is sort of where I'm sitting right now, is that it can be an incredible tool, but also, it's not taking away from what, that human piece, that people still will need that human interaction, and that, because I was at the nail salon this morning and I was just talking about my business, and she was just listening, and she's kind of interjecting a couple of things here and there, but it was the things that she said that sparked new ideas. And you don't necessarily get that from like AI, ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever you're using.
Yeah, no, and we're using different parts of our brain, aren't we? If we're sitting typing this prompt in, that's one bit of our brain. The other bit of our brain kicks into gear when we're using pen and paper, and I still recommend to a lot of people go back to pen and paper. That hand brain connection is so great. And then again, by talking, it's a different way of thinking, a different way of processing. So if we've got someone to talk things through with, then that just exactly like your nail salon example. I think that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I like to bring in my anecdotes. So if we kind of go back to new writers, and they're at the beginning of this journey, for those authors who have an idea, but they don't necessarily know how to put pen to paper, where is your recommendation that they kind of start in this huge, overwhelming process?
So if you are someone who is right at the beginning, you've never really written before, and this is just something that has come up recently, then I would stick with it for a period of time as being a hobby, as being just something that you do as and when the muse takes you, and that you're feeling the flow of it and you're enjoying it. Because when you're right at that beginning phase, it's too easy to think, oh, wouldn't it be great to be a writer? This would be a wonderful, but writing is really, really hard. It really is. You're creating something from nothing. So it's very taxing. It uses a lot of energy, even though you are just sitting down. So if you're really in those early stages, I would say continue for a period of time, just writing for fun, and see if you do enjoy it, if it is something that you could pursue over the long term. I would say as well, read, because there's a lot of writers who don't read, which still amazes me, but read a lot and read widely and find out what kind of stories do you enjoy. What would you like to write? Because that's a big part of the learning journey, the learning curve, as well as what kind of stories are you going to write? For example, myself, I've read widely across the canon and had grown up with the classics, and I thought, well, I'll be a literary writer because that's what I've read. Turns out, no, actually, my natural default is to very commercial genre fiction, and it was quite a surprise to me, and I've had to adapt as I've gone along. But I think you don't, by reading, that's how you get to find out the types of stories that you think that you could write best and would enjoy writing. Um, so that's where I'd be. And then if, a year down the line, or 6 months down the line, whatever it is that you find that you're still enjoying this, but you're still new to this, then there's nothing like taking some classes on how to write classes. And that's just learning the basics of how to put a sentence, a dialogue together, how you write dialogue, how you write description, how you think about story structure, and the bigger pieces. You really do need those craft elements. And so way before you start investing in a coach, which is a premium service that you'd be investing in, you want to take those weekend workshops, those evening classes, and maybe do at your local college if there's one there, that you take a term and really learn about the craft, the fundamental craft of writing, and go from there too. Did you enjoy it? Did it give you a kick? Was that something that you want to expand on? And then if you are, then you can start looking into being more, do you want to write flash fiction? Do you want to write short stories? Do you want to write a full-length novel? If you're an epic fantasy fan, you've got a big road ahead of you. So you need to kind of be thinking about that as you go. And then I would say, leave it for a few years before you do invest in a coach, because it is intense. You have to be committed. You've only got a certain amount of time with your coach. You don't want to be throwing away that money. I've had clients turn up in my early days. They'd pay me, but they wouldn't do the work. And it was frustrating for everybody because they weren't getting their money's worth, their investment's worth. And I felt, well, I'm not able to help you. I'm not doing my job. I can't do my job if you don't do the writing. And so everybody was kind of frustrated with it. So if you're right at the beginning, that would be my advice, is just take your time, go with it, and see if you enjoy it. Then if you do enjoy it and you do find it is something you want to make that investment into, then you can start looking for a coach.
Yeah.
And my top tip for finding the right coach is make sure it's somebody you like. Because, the skills are the skills, and all coaches will have those craft skills, but you're going to be working very closely with somebody. Writing a book and working with a coach is very intimate. A lot of you might think, I'm just writing a simple romance book, there's nothing to this. But actually, particularly for your first, say, 2 or 3 books, there's a heavy autobiographical element to it. So emotions will come up that you did not expect. And you will end up sharing things, or you want to be able to feel that you can share things with your coach confidentially and safely that you didn't know that you would be sharing with that coach. So it's important that you like each other. And that person is going to be feeding back to you on your pages. Sometimes it's going to be positive. Sometimes it's going to be negative. So you need to know that you can take those negative comments or that more critical feedback from somebody and know that they're doing it with the best of intentions. It's not to be hurtful. It's not to put you off, but it's to make you a better writer. So you have to like the person and the way that they communicate, so that you can receive that without feeling defensive and upset about it. So it is a very intimate relationship. And so feeling that you like the person that you're going to be investing in is my number one top tip.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like you're shopping around for a therapist almost. Like like finding someone that you can connect with and you feel comfortable with, and all of that is just I've spoken to many psychotherapists professionally, not personally, and so it just sounds like that. And did you have any other tips with authors, kind of perhaps it's through this process that they've received some critical feedback, or they've published the first book and they've received some public negative feedback? How do you kind of suggest they start to overcome that kind of negativity?
It's a hard one, isn't it? It really, really is. We are all going to encounter the feelings of rejection at some stage, whether that be in the very basic rejection letter from an agent or a publisher, or whether it be those first 1 and 2 star reviews. It comes down to a lot of the mindset that I mentioned earlier. It's about how you feel about yourself and how you feel about your work. And that's why if you put the hard work into this and you take your time with writing your book, you're proud of that book by the end of it. It doesn't need to win a prize for it to be a success. It's what's going on internally for you, that you feel you have done the best job you can where you are right now at this stage of your journey and this stage of your writing career. And you're proud of the effort that you've put in. You're proud of the work that you've done. You're proud to put this story out into the world. And that kind of strong resilience, that strong tenacity, which is something I help people with, that is what will sustain you through it. Of course, you're going to, I mean, I've certainly had my own tears when I've got my 1-star reviews, and but I can pick myself up so much quicker now because I've done a lot of the internal work that comes with putting yourself out on a ledge, basically putting yourself out there into the public forum. And I think this is the same for anybody who does a podcast, who has a social media account, anybody who invites people into their world. You're opening yourself up to other people's opinions, and they're not always going to agree with you. And that's why I say that the mindset is as important as having that the craft element of writing. And I think it's something that we don't always realize at first. But if you're feeling good in yourself, if you're feeling good about the work that you've done, that will help sustain you through it. And we have to remember that none of this is personal. When people are writing a 1-star review, it's not a judgment on you as an individual. It's on the craziest of things, but it's on the story predominantly. It's just not their cup of tea. They just wasn't for them. And for every one person who hates your story, there's going to be 5 others who love it. And we've got to remember that. But also we'll see people rejecting us because Amazon delivered the wrong book, or it came, you see people do this and it's crazy, but the book came with a dent, so they're blaming the author for that. So there's all those kinds of little things that we just have to deal with as we put ourselves out into the public forum. But the most important thing is to remember that it's not personal. Even though it can feel like it, it's not about you as an individual. Your art is not you. The art is not the artist. And that's part of the journey of it, is learning to differentiate ourselves. You hear a lot of people talk about their books as being their baby. We need to not think like that because, we know what it's like when people criticize our children. It hurts. By the time we come to put our book out in the world, it is a product. It is an item. And again, this is something I can help people with, but it's like just realizing that now we have birthed this book, we've birthed the story and these characters, and now we're giving that joy to other people in the world. And then we get to move on and we start our next book, but we can't see it as a reflection on ourselves. It's just that not every story is for every person. And the kind of person I always go back to exemplify this is Stephen King, because he's such a famous writer. He's done so well and people love him. But if you go and look on his Amazon list, you'll see that he has a lot of 5 stars. He's also got a lot of 1 stars. And so not every book is for every person. And we just have to keep reminding ourselves of that. And eventually, once we get far enough into our author career, we start to feel less personally about it and eventually stop reading those things and just know that we're doing the work that makes us feel happy. We know we've got our readers who enjoy our work and we focus on them and not on the negativity. And I'd say that's the same for people who are querying. Not every book is for every agent, and as frustrating as that is, it's just a simple fact, because agents are humans. They like certain stories, they dislike other stories, and again, it comes down to personal preference and the mood someone is in when they pick up your letter and read that opening synopsis. It's a lot of it is down to chance and down to luck, not necessarily down to talent. So we just have to keep remembering that it's an ongoing process, but we can certainly get more resilient as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate the kind of, it's not your child, and actually detaching kind of the emotion from the business now. Actually, as you said, it's a product, and it's out there for everyone to use, and to even technology products have reviews, not all of them good, and it all depends on what that user of that technology product is looking for, and their experience, and it's all down to them, and you just, it's their opinion, it's their business. So thank you so much for that. And what resources, we've kind of mentioned, courses, before you kind of get into this process of really getting into writing the first book, but are there any other resources that you think authors might find useful in kind of this first draft book process?
Yeah, so what resources do I like? So in terms of craft, I have my own book, which is called Launchpad, The Countdown to Writing Your Book, which is an anthology that I pull together with some other authors who I love. And we cover everything from story structure to scene structure to point of view to character development. And we even go kind of towards the end, looking for a writing group that can help support you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's many craft books out there that will help with that. Another one that I do recommend actually is James Scott Bell's Plot and Structure. He's a very plain speaker. I like the way that he describes things and talks about things. So again, just giving you new insight into how stories are pieced together and what we need to think about as we're putting stories together. So they would be two kind of craft-based books that I recommend as a good starting point. In terms of mindset and kind of understanding why you're writing, what it is you're trying to achieve with your writing, my two go-tos are always Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, which I think every writer should read, and Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird. Again, that for me was a real game changer in helping me understand I just have to write one word at a time, one scene at a time, one page at a time, one chapter at a time, and I'll get there. So those would be my two kind of books for mindset. And then I couldn't not mention my own course, if you don't mind.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was going to ask about that as well, so don't you worry.
I have a course called Unlock Your Creative Block, which is specifically for writers who really are feeling that they can't even get to the page. They know they've got a great story idea. They know that this is a calling within them, that they have got something to give to the world. But for some reason, whenever they think about sitting down to write, there's this kind of big wall of resistance that comes up, and they either want to go for a nap or they want to go for a run, but anything other than write. And it's very confusing to them as to why this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
But if that is you, then Unlock Your Creative Block is exactly what you need to help you kind of get through that. But I promise you, once you start looking at these resources that are out there, you will find it's a rabbit hole, but you're looking for the educator, the facilitator who you like and you want to learn from. There are so many teachers, great teachers out there who will be able to help you get where you want to be and help you get to that next step, because it's all about little steps. If you're right at the beginning, you just want to know the basics about how to tell a story. As you get further along, then you're looking for more nuanced teaching specifically about point of view or specifically about characterization. So one of the wonderful things about being a creative is that you're always learning, you're always gathering new knowledge and new ways of doing things. But those would be my top tips, I think, of getting started and seeing what's out there. Those are the ones that have helped me the most.
And just quickly about kind of those creative blocks, what is that? Like, why does that happen? Is it just a psychological thing that authors kind of hit and they're just like, what is it? Why do people get creative blocks?
I think it is. I think you hear people talk a lot about writer's block, and a lot of the advice that's given about writer's block is, go for a walk around the block, go and do some meditation, change the genre that you're writing, start a new story. In my book, that pun intended, that is not writer's block. That is feeling a bit stuck. That is feeling a bit bored with the story that you're in. That's a quick, easy fix. For me, writer's block is when you really just can't get to the page. And that does come down to what's going on inside your mindset. What's going on in there with what's happening with your heart and your head. And it's a lack of self-belief for many, many different reasons. So a lot of the stories that we've told ourselves as we've grown up and gone through the years, and we have a lot of stories we tell ourselves about what we are capable of, what standard that we have to achieve if we want to do something properly. If we want to be a real writer, then we've got to be like Margaret Atwood, or we've got to be like Hilary Mantel, or but we don't, is the truth. We have to be our own selves and write our own stories. But when we're at the beginning of that, and if our feelings of imposter syndrome, of not belonging, are very, very strong, then it's really hard to give yourself permission to go in and write your book and even start and just give it a go. And a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to do it. If it's going to be a waste of time, then I don't want to do it. I want to know that there's something at the end of this. If I don't know all the steps, then how can I start this project and know it won't have been a waste of time? There will be others who say, well, if it's not perfect, then I can't put this out in the world. Everyone will judge me. There's that feeling of being humiliated publicly, which doesn't happen, but we tell ourselves that it does. So there's all these inner stories that are going on and they go on in a loop in our head. And it can be very, very hard to break out of that loop unless we recognize it's there, understand where it's coming from, and then have the tools to kind of quieten that voice down enough that we can at least give it a go and write that first draft. But I do absolutely believe that comes internally. That comes from, you mentioned the psychology earlier, but I think it's a bit of psychoanalysis, self-analysis going on, and understanding why we feel the way we do about ourselves. Why do we say things to ourselves that we would never dream of saying to other people? But it's okay to be so horrible to ourselves. And if that voice is strong enough, that inner critic voice is strong enough, it will stop you getting to the page. And that's why you can't write the book that you know is a great story. You know you've got it in you. You know you were put on this planet to do it. But it's not going to happen until you move past those blocks that you've got. So it's stronger. Writer's block is about more than just needing to go for a walk around the block.
I love that. So we're nearly up for today on time, but if we could kind of summarize today in one kind of takeaway piece of advice that authors and people listening could take away from our discussion today, what would that piece of advice be?
So this is a question that I was asked of, my coaches asked me in the early days, and it would be, why are you writing? To really sit down and give that some thought. Why are you writing? Why do you want to do this? What does it give you? What do you enjoy about it? What do you want long term from this? I think these are questions that we don't ask ourselves in the beginning. A lot of us just delve into this because it seems like fun in the moment. And then as we start to take it more seriously, we lose the joy, we lose the fun. In the writing process, we get very earnest about it. We want it to be perfect and the biggest bestseller ever. But I think that's a really good starting point, is to ask yourself, well, what does writing do for you? Why do you enjoy it? What do you want from it? What is your big goal for this future? What do you envision happening with it? For some people, it will be, I want that Pulitzer, I want that Man Booker Prize. For others, it will be, I want to sell 1 million copies. For others, it will be, have one story. I just want to write that one story and I want it to be published, and that's it. That's my big dream for it. I don't need to have the whole career. And then there'll be everything else in between those 2 points. So give some thought to that, genuinely, sincerely, give some thought to that, do some journaling on it. Because you might discover actually you don't love it enough to want to go through the tough times and the heartache of writing this and the frustration of writing it, that actually it makes you feel worse at the end of a writing session than better. But equally, you may discover, oh no, this is why I'm doing it. And then you'll come back to that again and again when you're in those tough times to remember, this is why I'm doing it. This is why I'm putting myself through this and can't sleep at night and I'm pulling my hair out and waking up stressed in the morning because I want this dream. And if you've got that clear in your head, that will just help you keep going.
Well, Emma, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you kind of sitting down and chatting to me about all of this. And I think we may just have to come back and do another podcast session because I still have so many more questions. But for all of our listeners, any links to Emma's websites and courses will be provided in the podcast description and on the podcast webpage. But Emma, thank you so much. It's been so great to speak to you.
Oh, pleasure, Erica. Thank you for inviting me. It's been lovely getting to know you.